So I would like everyone to imagine that their hands are covered with dirt.
Okay.
For you have just been gardening, trying to raise plants out of the ground and tend to them. Gardening is all about surprises, however. Just because you worked on it hard doesn't mean that you're necessarily successful. There's weeds, there's other items that come in there that can be challenging. Next, I want you to visualize that you're covered in sawdust. For you are now a carpenter, and this time around it's all about precision and planning. For when you see that piece of wood, you have a blueprint that tells you what that piece of wood needs to look like, and you execute accordingly. Alison Grupneck described parenting in kind of these terms. You have the gardener and you have the carpenter. The difference between the two is all about surprises and precision. So in order to cover this, let's go back in time. Let's go back thousands of years. Historically, villages have all helped together to raise children. It was like a team effort, so to speak. Children interacted with the community in the process, and also, ever since they were young, they were seeing everybody raising children. So everybody knew. It was just community knowledge for this. Well, we move ahead a few thousand years. Keep on going, keep on going, keep on going. And now we've reached the Industrial Revolution, the 20th century. Things are changing. All of a sudden, in order to handle these new jobs, we need to find skilled labor, and it's not out there. So with industrialization comes also centralization. So people start moving and whatnot. People start coming together. Instead of being in a large community, now they're in smaller houses and whatnot. Well, there's availability of work first, and then there's the work first knowing what to do. So schools actually really take off in the 20th century. They weren't really as organized as what happened with the Industrial Revolution. And their main goal was to teach people how to interact in this new world. Very prescriptive. There's math, there's literature and whatnot. That's all applicable to the workforce. Well, in order to do this quick, because they were behind the 8-ball, they had to teach people the right way. Had to show them exactly how to do it. And then, like little bumblebees, they just follow the script. Well, there's kind of a change in parenting styles in that, how these kids and everything were raised. Can you see the difference? Earlier on it was communities and whatnot, and then all of a sudden it became more centralized and more prescriptive. Well, now we move forward a little bit more to the 21st century. And actually, this is something that's pretty neat. The word parenting all of a sudden becomes part of our lexicon. Prior to that, parenting didn't really exist as a word. People just called it whatever. I mean, it was a matter of just everybody knew how to raise kids, I guess you'd say. So there was no need to have a word. But now that all of a sudden everybody was so focused on their tasks, well, they weren't part of that community, and they couldn't see the exposure of how everybody else was doing it. So parents took to reading books and all, and coming up with how to do it, best techniques and everything like that. Much like they were taught in school. School, you grab your books, you read it, you study, and you do the test. Well, they were applying that to parenting as well, and continue to today as well. So in this process, a checklist had been established. Kids had to do well in testing and all. They had to do well in the SAT, check, check, check. And all of a sudden, play kind of got replaced by this checklist. So we have to think about the future. The Industrial Revolution needs were met quite nicely by the whole notion of schooling, because these tasks were needed and got accomplished. But in the future, as has been kind of mentioned on previous meetings, AI is coming. Robots and artificial intelligence and whatnot. And many of these tasks that these kids have been taught in high school or in higher education, many of these tasks can be handled by robots. So me as a parent, I can't help but think about how can I help my kids along for this. So with the whole notion of robots coming and whatnot, I'd like to actually make an argument for play. I think play is our answer in order to have a brighter future, because play creates flexibility. and children, and that's necessary. You know, the robots tend to be a little bit more scripted and whatnot. Now, in order to have play happen here, there needs to be an argument to convince people that play is worthwhile. And that actually comes from the squeaky toy. There was a research study that was done that a child came in with the squeaky toy, or actually an adult came in with the squeaky toy, looked very authoritative, and just handed the toy to the child and moved on. And the kid looked at it and all of a sudden started playing with it. And pretty soon the child realized that the toy did far more than just squeak. 24 different functions, we'll say. So, in another case, the parent walked in and all of a sudden, or the role model walked in, handed the toy and said, "This is my favorite squeaky toy," and squeaked it and handed it and moved on. So the child only focused on the squeaking, got really good at squeaking, but never discovered those other things because it was so focused on the squeaking toy. Well, play allows us to explore other possibilities out there. In fact, the very robots that I'm talking about, when they have been asked to pick up, clothes and whatnot in order to go fold them, they have found way more success in first teaching the robot how to hop. That's all it's doing. This robot's going to fold clothes, but all it's doing is just hopping. And that's all it's told to do. It's not told to do anything else but hop. But later on, it remembers how to hop, and it remembered its capabilities and its limitations. So I would like to kind of have a call to action to everybody here, because everybody here is here because you're active, engaged members of the community, just by nature of this group. So if there is schools or you hear discussions happening as far as having kids be a little bit more engaged with we'll say, like apprenticeship programs in schooling, I strongly encouraging that, maybe even participating in these apprentice programs in order to have the kids play with these higher level techniques of science or literature or what have you earlier on in middle school, instead of saving it for college when it might have been too late. Thank you.